Hi, everybody. So, today we are starting chapter 5, and the first section of chapter 5 is going to be ratios and rates. So, right now, before we begin, I just want to make sure everybody has their math composition notebook out, has a writing utensil, and is ready to write down everything that's on my screen as I go through this video. All right. So, let's start with the learning target. Go ahead and write this down. The learning target is I will be able to determine ratios and rates. So, ratios and rates, the nice thing about these is it does relate a lot to real life. So, we're going to go through examples of different ratios and different rates, and you're probably going to be like, oh, I've seen a lot of these examples in real life, which that's one of the things I love most about math is when we can connect it with real life. So let's start with some definitions. And so I'm going to read a definition and then I want you to pause it and write this down in your notebook. So the first one is a ratio. A ratio is a comparison of two quantities using division. And you can either write a ratio as a fraction, which is this way, or you can write it with the 2 in between, so 3 to 2, or you can write it with the semicolon. So those are the 3 ways you can write a ratio. So pause the video and write down that definition, please. Okay, you should have that written down. So now I want you to write down this second definition, which is about rate. So a rate is a ratio of two quantities with different units. Okay, so the key thing about this is it has different units. So go ahead, pause the video, and write this definition down. Okay, and then the third definition is unit rate. And unit rate is a rate with a denominator of 1. All right, denominator is 1. So essentially, a unit rate is the same thing as a rate pretty much, except you gotta make sure that the denominator equals 1. Okay, that's the one thing you gotta make sure. So pause the video and write this down, please. Okay, so now we're gonna look at a couple examples of ratios, rates, and unit rate. All right, so let's go down to example 1. Finding ratios and rates. So here it says there are 45 males and 60 females in a subway car. The subway car travels 2.5 miles in 5 minutes. Find the ratio of males to females. So you want to make sure that you're pay attention to the language. So this says males to females, okay? Which means that males is going to come first. So I'm going to set this up as a fraction. I'm going to set it up as males over females. This is the first way that I can represent a ratio is by a fraction. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to write down how many males there are, which is 45 in the top. Then in the denominator, I'm going to write down how many females there are, which is 60. Okay, so now here comes the important part. When you have a ratio as a fraction, you must reduce. So write that down. You must reduce, okay? So we don't just stop here. We need to figure out what can we reduce this by. So I see that I'm going to grab my calculator. But 45 and 60, I see the last digit of 45 is a 5 and the last digit of 60 is a 0. So I know I could divide both of those by 5. So I'm going to divide both of them by 5, and that's going to give me 9 over 60 divided by 5 is 12. So then I want to look at this again. Can I reduce it even further? Well, I know that 9 and 12 can both be divided by 3. So I'm going to reduce it by 3, and it's going to be 3 over 4. So you could have done that in one step if you wanted to. I don't mind reducing using 2 steps because sometimes it works better for our brains. So do whatever way works best for you. Okay, so 3 to 4, this is the ratio. We also could write this as 3 to 4, okay? Or we could also write it as 3 semicolon or colon 4, okay? So those are different ways we can write a ratio. So either one of those works. All right. Let's go down. So find the speed of the subway car. Okay, so it says the subway car travels 2.5 miles in 5 minutes. So we've all been in a car before, right? Maybe not a subway car, but we've been in a car, probably, most of us. So if your parents are driving or if someone in your family is driving, essentially, typically, you see signs that say 60 miles per hour, 20 miles per hour. That's the speed limit. And that's a unit rate, okay? So right now, we need to find the speed of the car, and we're going to write this as a ratio. So 2.5 miles in 5 minutes. So we're going to write it just like that. So we're going to write 2.5 miles in 5 minutes. And make sure when you have different units, you need to label. Okay, so you always want to label our units in this section. So we have 2.5 miles divided by 5. Okay, so now if we wanted to find the unit rate and decide how many miles do you go in a minute, what we need to do is we need to divide this by 5. Why? Why would we divide both the top and the bottom by 5? Well, think about it. 5 divided by 5 is going to give me 1, which that's what I want, because remember, if we scroll up to the top, with unit rate, you always want your denominator to be 1. So I essentially, to find the unit rate, I'm always going to just divide the denominator by whatever number that is. And so since it's 5 this time, that's going to divide it by 5, that's going to give me 1. And then, of course, whatever we do to the bottom, we also have to do the top to keep it consistent. So we're going to do 2.5 divided by 5, and that's going to give me 0.5 miles, okay? So that is the speed of the car. It travels 0.5 miles per 1 minute. And just to be clear, this is unit rate since there is a 1 in the denominator, okay? So if we were to write this out, we would write down the speed is 0.5 miles per minute, okay? So that is the speed of the subway car. Okay, let's scroll down. We're going to take a peek at ratio tables. So ratio tables are something you are going to see in your homework. So when we are dealing with ratio tables, okay, there's a couple different ways we can go about it, okay? So it says the ratio table shows the cost for different amounts of artificial turf. Find the unit rate in dollars per square feet. So what we can do without even really paying attention to the patterns in the table is we are going to, it says it wants us to find the unit rate in dollars per square feet. Okay, so this language, it has dollars first, which means if you look here, dollars is the cost. So cost is going to go on top of our fraction and amount is going to go on the bottom. And the reason why I get that is because look, dollars comes first, square feet comes second. So it wants us to figure out the unit rate in dollars per square feet, which means it needs to be cost over amount. So don't be confused because sometimes the ratio table will be set up a different way. So see how amount's on top in the ratio table? That doesn't necessarily mean that when you set up your rate, you're going to put it in the same exact order. You have to make sure that you read the sentence and be careful about which one goes on top and the bottom, okay? Okay, so now what we're going to do, essentially all we do if we want to find the unit rate, well, we need a rate first. So we're going to just take one of these boxes in the table, okay? So I'm just going to use the first one. You can use any. You'll get the same answer either way. So make sure you're careful. Cost goes first. So we're putting 100 on top and 25 on bottom, okay? Make sure you label it. So it's $100 and 25 feet squared. Okay, so we just use the first ratio in the table. Now we need to simplify, okay? Simplify. So if we want to find unit rate, it's asking us to find unit rate, okay? We need to divide both the top and the bottom by the number that's in the denominator. So since 25 is in the denominator, I'm going to multiply the top and the bottom by 25. This is going to give me my unit rate. So 100 divided by 25 is going to give me 4. And remember, it's dollars. And then 25 divided by 25 is going to give me 1 foot squared. All right. So this is the unit rate. Okay. This is the unit rate. It's $4 per square feet. And we can write it out with our language. So we can write it out and say the unit rate is $4 per square feet. Okay. So make sure that you have that down. those are the steps for ratios, rate, and unit rate. Real quick. So let's just look at the table, and I'm going to show you guys how we can kind of be aware of patterns when we're looking at a table. So think 25 to 100. So everything's consistent when it's in a table and it's actually a ratio. So 25, what do you have to multiply 25 by to get to 100? What do you have to multiply 25 by to get to 100? Well, I know 25 times 4 gives me 100, right? Well, look down here. 100 times what gives me 400? 100 times 4. Notice how that's the same. All right, now if we go from 100 to 400, 100 times what equals 400? Well, that's 4 again. Same thing here. 400 times what equals 1600? Well, that's by 4. So notice that you are multiplying by 4 every single time. And then notice that your unit rate right here is $4 per 1 square feet. So that is kind of another way that we can check is looking at the table, finding the patterns to make sure that the unit rate that we calculated is actually correct. Okay, so that is 5.1. Make sure you have all these notes down in your composition notebook, and we will work on the assignment in class. All right, nice job.